Hey guys, just the usual. Can somebody give me a thumbs up or just say yes, you can hear me or anything else, just so that I know I'm coming through? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Max. Perfect, Chase. Excellent. Chase, I was wondering, do I know you? That may seem like a strange question if the answer is no. I was just wondering if you were someone that I knew. Okay, thank you. Okay, I thought you were somebody else that I knew from a long time ago, just because your name is very, very similar. Um, oh, just because your name was very, just slightly different from someone that I used to know a long time ago. That was actually a really good friend of mine, and I thought maybe you had just popped up on here. Oh, but anyway, so what we're going to start with tonight. Remember, I told you guys that you don't necessarily have to belong to any. Oh, well, first, let me start off by saying thank y'all for being here. I was, a little afraid that we wouldn't even have that big of a turnout tonight, just because we're so close to Christmas. We're in that time of year whenever, it's kind of a dead time. People call it that, a dead time, just because no one's working. People aren't really doing anything, but it's actually, this is my favorite time of the year. This is the time that it's always felt the absolute most magical to me. But it's also that time of year when people sort of slack off a little bit, kind of don't focus on the outside world, stay to themselves, eat a little more. They're just getting into that celebration mood. So thank you guys. Yeah, Mandy says, I love the stillness this time of year. Absolutely. My absolute favorite time of the year. And this is maybe weirdly specific, but from December the 11th up until Christmas morning. It's like during that 2-week period of the year, it's almost like the energy in the air, like that feeling that you only feel around this time of year. It gets denser and denser and thicker. And then on Christmas morning, people get up, they open their presents and what have you, and it's like it's all gone. It's all evaporated. It's back to life as usual. Okay, so thank y'all for being with me tonight. So what I wanted to do, remember I was talking about when we were talking about doing the Magnum Opus classes, I was saying that I also want to give y'all the work on here, even if you're not attending the classes, if you're not part of the courses. I wanted to give y'all, yes, Jacob said expectation. That's a really good way to describe it. But I wanted to give y'all the work on here. I've always said over and over, you don't have to be a member of any group. You don't have to be initiated into any organization. You don't have to have any specific teacher, none of those things. Ultimately, what matters is your hunger for this material, your desire to do this work. By this work, I mean the great work, and the level of effort and consistency that you're willing to put into it. That's the only thing that matters when it comes to this stuff. Everything else is just icing on the cake. So what I wanted to do is give y'all like some of the information. It won't be all of the information, just because, number one, I don't have Derek here with me, who fills in tremendous gaps of things that I forget. I'll probably forget half of what we even talked about. Y'all know how that is. I have to be reminded of things constantly. And, when we do it like through the course, it usually takes about 2 hours. So we'll only spend about an hour doing it tonight. But the aim is to give you everything that you need in order to start doing this work alongside people who are doing, who are in the Magnum Opus courses. So the very first thing that we started with, and there's a lot to this, a lot to go into, but the very first thing we started with, you remember I was telling everybody that the prerequisite to doing this coursework is you had to be proficient at doing the LBRP. You have to be proficient at doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. If you can do that, you can do anything else that comes along later. You can do any of these other bigger rituals. If you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to do anything else, and everything else that comes later is going to just be like useless, theory and philosophy to you, because you won't be able to put it into motion, into work, if you can't do the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. And the reason that that's so is because when you're doing that one ritual, you're learning everything that you're going to need to know to do the stuff that comes along later, stuff that isn't necessarily even in a lot of the books. And I won't go into all of that because by this point, if you're going to be doing this ritual, if you're going to be doing the self-initiation ritual, you should already have a very good grasp on how to do some of this work. You know what I mean by that? For example, you know how I always talk about in, like, say, the Golden Dawn, Israel Regarde's Black Brick. They don't tell you, like, we never use our own energy whenever we're doing magic. They just tell you, for example, when you're doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, they tell you walk to the eastern part of the circle and draw this flaming blue, I'm drawing it in the invoking one, but draw this flaming blue banishing pentagram in the east. And that's all they say. They don't tell you we don't use our own energy whenever we're doing this, that every time you're supposed to inhale and you're pulling in chi from the universe around you, that basically we are existing in this, we're almost like fish in an aquarium, and the water that we exist in and that exists in us is God. So what we're doing, and you know, people have given different names to it over time. Like when you're talking about just the energy aspects of it, people call it chi, ruach, prana. You know, there's tons of different names for it, but it's essentially energy and it is sentient. This is why, like, when you do magic, you don't necessarily have to, like, tell it how to do what you're trying to get it to do. Like, say, for example, if you're doing magic for prosperity, you don't have to think of each individual step that the magic needs to go through to accomplish something. You just cut out the middleman and think of the end result, which is you being prosperous, or you being in a loving relationship, or you being healed from sickness, or, you know, you living in a place you want to live, whatever it is. You just tell the energy, you put the intention into it, but you don't tell it how to do it. That's because it behaves sentiently. It behaves as if it is conscious. That's God. That's what we're talking about. Remember how I always talk about God is like a shorthand word for this infinite source of energy and consciousness that everything came from, and that everything will one day return to. Every time you inhale and you take in chi, you're also taking in God. You're taking in divinity. That's the energy that you use whenever you're drawing these pentagrams. That's the energy you use when you're drawing the white line around the room that connects the pentagrams. So you should already have a firm grasp of those things and be able to do those things and be practicing those things regularly in order to be able to do the self-initiation ritual. And that's the ritual, the homework ritual that people were given in the first group. And we'll get to that later on. But first, I wanted to cover a couple of things to the best of my ability, as much as I can remember, that we covered whenever we were talking about self-initiation. So first, the most important question, you know, keep in mind when we do magic, there's essentially two basic components to doing magic. Everything we do falls into one of these categories in one way or another. One is pulling in energy, and the second thing is programming that energy with an intention. A lot of times people aren't successful at magic just because they don't even have an intention. They read a ritual in a book and they go about trying to do it, usually incorrectly. You know, like, for example, they don't know that you inhale and draw in light from the universe around you that passes through you and out your feet, and then it rushes back up through you as you're drawing the pentagram. Like, they don't even know stuff like that usually. But they also don't realize what this stuff is for, so they're kind of doing it with no intention. Now, some of these things, like the Golden Dawn rituals, some of these things do things to you even if you don't have an intention behind them. Like the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, it does something to you whether you have an intention or not. And you know, part of that is why they would never tell you like what to expect or any of that. They would say, go do this ritual for a year, come back and talk to us in a year if you still want to learn magic. Let me see, what is Shane talking about? Oh, does the Golden Dawn teach basic rituals in the beginning with, say, just one thing that is wrong that is taught correctly later in higher grades? So, what Shane's talking about in magic, there's this tradition of doing, they call it a bind, putting a bind in certain rituals. And like the kind of rumor behind that is that they give you one thing wrong so that you have to figure it out for yourself, because ultimately what matters is the amount of work that you put into it. I don't think that's necessarily true. There are people that have done things like that, but I think more often than not, it's probably people like me who just forget stuff, or it's people who misspeak and say something wrong. You know, I'll do that before. Like, I'll be talking about, for example, a book of the Bible, and I'll say the name of one book when it's actually whatever I'm talking about is in a different book. Um, so maybe, could be. With the Golden Dawn, not necessarily. With the Golden Dawn, it was more the fact that, you know, I've said this over and over, how that is not a complete book. Y'all are asking a lot of questions now. As a matter of fact, hold on. I'm going to cover the questions up just so I don't get distracted until we get to the part to do question and answer, because I don't want to get off track and forget what I'm talking about, which I've already done. What was it? Self-initiation. Oh, so you need to be proficient and have an understanding of how to do these basic rituals in order to do the self-initiation ritual. The reason I bring up intention, like most people, if they're like, I see this a lot, like in witchcraft, they'll do a ritual just for the purpose of, like, say, worshiping something, you know, like a religious service of sorts. But there's no intention for like the magic or what have you. It's important to know exactly what you're doing magic for. That's the reason intention is so important. Intention is the reason that you are doing magic. What's the reason you're doing magic? If you don't know the reason that you're doing something, a lot of times, especially when you're talking about manifestation type stuff, a lot of times if you don't know the reason you're doing it, you're going to get very muddy results. It's like going out for a walk and not even really knowing where you're going out for a walk to. You could end up anywhere because you didn't have an intention. You didn't have a set focus on where you were going. So our intention with the self-initiation ritual is self-initiation. But what does that mean? You know, one of the things we were talking about is like in the groups is like, what does initiation really mean? And people have all kinds of, you know, ideas about like what that word means, what that process means, all of that. Like, for example, most people, when they hear the word initiation, one of the meanings of initiation is people think of it as like joining a group. Like if you go through an initiation, then you're part of a group. And yes, that is absolutely in some cases part of it. Like if you are initiated, for example, into the Golden Dawn, then you're part of the Golden Dawn. Or whatever, or the Boy Scouts, or whatever it is. If you're initiated into it, then yes, that is part of it. Another meaning when we talk about initiation, you know, the word initiate means to begin. When you initiate something, you begin something. Well, you know, what are we beginning here? When you're doing the self-initiation, what are you beginning? And also, what's the symbolism behind initiation? You know, almost everything in magic is a symbol that you have to figure out how to decode in one way or another. Just like art, you know how I talk about art in the ancient world was different than what we think of as art now. Like if you're looking at Sumerian and Egyptian, you know, all Babylonian, all of these old school, you know, the old world art, all the way up until the Renaissance, art was used and seen as a vehicle that was used to pass techniques, information, all of that on to future generations and civilizations. after the Renaissance, I've said this before, art became more about cultural cannibalism. It's people talking about, whatever their feelings are, or whatever's going on currently in the political world, or, all of the stuff that's not really, connected to this long lineage of symbolism. Magic is the same way. These rituals are symbols. So what does initiation and by extension an initiation ritual, what does it symbolize? This is one of the things that Derek, he doesn't have 20 years of brain trauma, and he's also the equivalent. One of the reasons, like we talked about in the group, one of the reasons that I wanted him to be part of this so much and help me do this is because I'm someone who is almost entirely self-taught. When I was in prison, I had to figure, nobody was telling me the answers to this stuff. I had to figure this stuff out through trial and error, working every day. And if something didn't work, then I knew I was doing it wrong. And I had to figure out what I was doing wrong. And I had to figure out a lot of stuff. And I figured it out through trial and error, just putting one foot in front of the other. Nobody was baby burdening me the information, any of that sort of stuff. Derek, on the other hand, is like the equivalent of someone who went to school for this stuff. He has been formally initiated into many different orders and organizations, everything from, the Freemasons to Martinist traditions, alchemical traditions. Like he's taken in a lot of stuff that he was given in very formal settings. And he understands a lot of the history, symbolism, stuff like that I don't necessarily understand. That's pretty much the story of my life. I dropped out of school not long after I could read and write. After that, for me, it was all about educating myself, going to the library, reading about the things I wanted to read about. And in some ways, I think that's great. It's amazing. In other ways, you miss things sometimes. So one of the things we were talking about, like what initiation actually symbolizes, like what you're doing symbolically when you go through an initiation, is what initiation has always been seen as is death and resurrection, or death and rebirth. You are dying and you are being reborn. And in a lot of traditions, they do this stuff as close to reality as they can. I'll give you one example. Like one group that I know of in New York, they would do things like when you were brought in for the first level initiation, it would be done in this building that actually had a really old well in the basement. And whenever you came in, you would get into this well and it would be pitch dark, and they would put a cover on it and everybody leaves. And you would just sit there and you don't know what's going on. You're just sitting there in the dark for, in reality, probably 15 minutes, but it seems like a hell of a lot more than that, longer than that, when you're just sitting in a dark ass well with no idea what anybody's doing up there. That's the death process. That's you being buried. And then you have the resurrection process, which is you being reborn. And, even, one of the things that Derek had brought up was even in Christianity, like not modern day fundamentalist Christianity where people don't have any, understanding of what all this stuff means. But like in the ancient Christian mystery traditions, that's what baptism is. Even in the Catholic Church, they call it the sacrament of Christian initiation, or the sacrament of initiation into the Christian tradition, something like that. But that's the words they use. That's what baptism represents. You're going down under the water, you're being buried, and then you're brought back up. You're brought back into the world as a new person. And you'll see this in a bunch of different ways, like one of the things we were talking about, and you'll see the pillars behind me, for example. You see the black and the white pillars back here, lit up with the little flames on top. So, you see these pillars, and my thing slipped down and I can see Joe Hawkins is saying sounds traumatic. It's supposed to test you. It's not supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be something you just sail through. You know, if it's, there are times whenever initiation rituals would even be stopped, and the person says, they tell you, go home, come back in a year, and, you know, during that time, study, practice some more, and we'll see if you're ready for it in a year. Max says it rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it doesn't get initiation. But you know, like even, you know, in certain other traditions, like say the Masons, or even other traditions that use pillars, these are miniature versions of those pillars. That's the reason I got these, just so that you can see them and you can kind of get an idea of a picture of what I'm talking about. Like in some of these traditions, after the death process, you would be led around and between these two pillars. Well, that's the rebirth process, because the pillars represent a lot of things, you know, like going all the way back to the High Priestess card in the tarot, as well as a bunch of other things, you know, even things like, you know, the wand of double power. The black represents earth, the white represents heaven. So it's heaven and earth combined. It's the joining of heaven and earth. Same way with the pillars, it's the joining of heaven and earth. You'll notice a lot of times when you go into lodges or orders, you know, places like the Masons, for example, when you walk in and you see you'll see a checkerboard floor, like you see black and white squares all over the floor. The black and white squares represent the merging of heaven and earth. The black represents earth, the white represents heaven. Bringing those two things together, spiritualizing the material, materializing the spiritual, both of those things, which is ultimately the big royal secret of magic, that's what you're doing. But whenever people are led through those two pillars, the pillars represent your mother's legs when you're born into this world. When you enter this world, you enter between the pillars of your mother's legs as she's giving birth. So when you walk between these two pillars during an initiation ritual, you are being reborn. So who's dying? Who's being reborn? What does this mean? The dying part is your old life, your old self, who you were, the profane you, the impure you before this ritual. The you that doesn't know. But this is another meaning of, like, in a lot of these rituals, like even in the one I was talking about where you're brought in and put in a well, you're blindfolded when you're brought in. They call it hoodwinked. Sometimes you'll have like a whole black bag over your head. Sometimes it's just the blindfold. But even that is symbolic. Even that represents the fact that before you go through this ordeal, you couldn't see anything beyond the material world. You couldn't see anything beyond the mundane, mediocre existence that most people mistake for the totality of reality. And whenever they pull the blindfold off of you during the ritual, it's like Paul in the New Testament, whenever it says the scales fell from Paul's eyes and he was able to see. That's the same thing that it represents whenever they pull the blindfold off of you. You go from a state of being in darkness representing ignorance, to being born into the light, to seeing that there is more to the world and more to reality than you thought, than you knew, than you've been taught. So, what are you being reborn into? If it's the old profane you, that's entire focus is upon the material world. If that's who's dying, then what are you being reborn into? You are being reborn into a life of meaning and purpose. You are being reborn onto the spiritual path, this path that eventually leads to the great work, the completion of the great work, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other. You know, it's like that guy, the author Graham Hancock, was talking about how humans are a species with amnesia, and other people have said this too. They say what they mean by that is, you know, most of humanity has no idea where they came from. They have no idea where they're supposed to be going, and they have no idea how to get there. They're just flailing around out here until they die. and wasting most of their lives, just working like 9-to-5 jobs until they retire, and then retire and watching Wheel of Fortune or whatever it is people do. When you are reborn knowing that there is more to the world than this. There is more to life than this. And you have started down this path. You have taken the very first steps on it. One of the things about doing some of these rituals also is that, one of the things we were talking about is how when you're doing these rituals, you will see them mirrored a lot of times in the external world. Like when you're doing the self-initiation ritual, you're not doing a ritual that's geared towards manifesting any sort of change in your external environment. That's not the goal of it. However, you will often see that happen just as a side effect of the changes in you, because your external world is going to mirror your internal world. And when you change your internal world, your external world is by extension going to change. So one of the things people notice if you're going through an initiation is that certain aspects of your old life and your old way of living may die away, may fade away. You may lose friends. You may experience, people think that spirituality is all rainbows and unicorns and fun and good times, and we're never going to suffer and all this kind of stuff. That is not what it is. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, I think the most eloquent way they described it, they said most people think of enlightenment, they think that you're going to gain something. Enlightenment is not gaining anything. Enlightenment is a process of losing. You lose things. You can lose a lot of different things. You can lose, like I said, friends. You can lose an old job. You can lose anything in your life that is preventing you from growing and developing more. And sometimes it's not pleasant. I look at back, so things being mirrored like that in the outside world. One of the things that I realized, just doing these rituals and looking at my own life is how when I went through this initiation process, I didn't do it symbolically. I experienced it literally. I was literally sentenced to death. I didn't reenact it in a symbolic form. I was sentenced to die. And then I was sent to the underworld. I was taken out of this world, out of the only world that most people will know, most people will ever know. I was taken completely out of this world and sent to a place beyond the view and the understanding and beyond the comprehension of most of the people that exist walking down the street that you're going to pass on a normal daily basis. I was in the underworld for almost 20 years. And then on August 19th of 2011, I was reborn back into this world. The death, the process of being dead, and then the resurrection that comes from that, the rebirth. I went through all of those things literally. This is one of the reasons people can't understand sometimes whenever I say, I don't look at what happened, what I went through. I don't look at it as something that happened to me. I see it as something that happened for me. That's part of why I say that, because it was an initiation for me. But a lot of times when you do the self-initiation ritual and you're doing it correctly, consistently over and over, this isn't something you do just one time. This is something you do daily. This is a daily practice. Doing this first ritual, you're supposed to do it every day. I've talked to people about it before and I've told them do this every day for the next month and I'll talk to you next month. I talk to them next month and I'm like, how many times did you do this since we talked? And they're like, well, 1 or 2 times because it seemed kind of repetitive to me. Well, that's the whole point and purpose of it. It's supposed to be repetitive. You don't get stronger by going to the gym one day and lifting a weight one time and then you walk out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. The effects are cumulative. So when you're doing this ritual, you're doing a bunch of different things. One of which, I've always used the analogy, the metaphor of a cup of water or a glass of water. Like if you took a glass of water and just left it sitting in a room, it's going to get nasty. It's going to stagnate. It's going to get a film over the top of it. If you take this glass of water to the kitchen and turn the faucet on and hold this water up under it and let it overflow and overflow and overflow, eventually, even if you don't clean the glass out, you're going to be left with a clean glass of water just because of that constant new energy, new water coming in, old being flushed out. This is the same thing you're doing to yourself with the self-initiation ritual, only instead of water, you're doing it with energy. A lot of times people kind of compare it to water, though. Like even when you're doing something like the middle pillar and you're circulating the light, they'll tell you try to feel it as if warm water is flowing down one side of your body and up the other side of your body, just so that you can kind of add tactile sensation to it. So this astral light, this astral energy that we're working with is a lot of times compared to water. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because that's important too. What was I talking about? The pillars, rebirth. Somehow I got talking about water. Oh, so going back to just for a second, the thing about people, like what people think of when they think of initiation. The people who only think of it as being part of a group, like say being initiated into the Golden Dawn or the OTO or the AA or the Masons or whatever it is, that's the only thing they think of it as. I'm talking about their understanding of it. Basically, well, first off, I don't trash talk other people's work just for the point of trash talking their work, whatever. I've always viewed that like if you just shit talk other people, that's like one of the lowest, worst personality traits or characteristics or qualities that you can develop in yourself. If you hang out with people who talk shit about other people all the time, eventually you find yourself doing the same thing. I do my best to avoid that at all times. I mess up sometimes. Everybody messes up. But that's not why I'm saying this. What was I talking about? What I mean is the vast majority of those people have no idea what they're doing. And I say this from firsthand, my own personal experience of coming in contact with so many people in that world. They may know the rituals on a theoretical level, like they know, go over here and draw this star, or they may know, like, have memorized correspondences or things like that. But you can tell by the way they act and the way they move through the world that it's had no real effect on them. It's had no real effect on them mentally. It's had no real effect on them emotionally. It's had no real effect on them spiritually. And a lot of that is because they don't even understand, like the basic mechanics of doing the rituals. Say, for example, breathe in, take the light in, and use the light to draw the pentagram. That's the one I'm coming back to over and over because it's the easiest to remember. And maybe they went through the initiation ritual and they think, well, that's it. So one of the things that Derek was describing is how there's essentially two kinds of initiation. And he was talking about this guy that was like a French traditionalist. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but he described it as saying there's essentially two kinds of initiation. There is horizontal initiation and vertical initiation. One going this way and one going this way. Most people, when they think of initiation, only think of the horizontal initiation, which means from initiate to initiate, which is usually like, an order or a lodge or something like that. One person initiates another person and you're part of the group or whatever. But it doesn't really create any big changes in you. When you go through it, it doesn't change you in any radically dramatic way. In that situation, most people, like the people that are involved in that, like doing just the horizontal initiations, To them, it's more about, they're what Crowley called drifting occultist, which means people who are just collecting certificates and degrees and titles and stuff like that. They building an identity for themselves, essentially. Every now and then you will come across someone or a small group that does understand this stuff and is able to convey, pass this current from one to the next, but it is very, very rare, very rare. Most of it is just people who've collected titles and certificates and degrees and whatnot. Yes, Twisted Sage says, I think the guy he was talking about was Rene Guignon. That is it. Thank you. That's who it was. So that's horizontal initiation, from initiate to initiate, from person to person. Vertical initiation is between you and God. Vertical initiation descends from on high. I say God, but it can also be from other sources. For example, it can be what in the Golden Dawn they called the secret chiefs. It is, part of, they say that's where we got a lot of these rituals, that we were given them by these secret chiefs. And part of the purpose of doing these rituals is to bring you in contact with them yourself for even further initiations. So what a lot of time, vertical initiation depends on two things. One is grace, and grace can't be bought, can't be sold. Grace is basically, a higher power deciding to, I'm not even sure how to describe it, a higher power deciding to imbue your life with something that is going to cause a radical transformation in you. So the other thing, so there's the grace part of it, and there's also the amount of work and dedication that you put into it. I keep saying over and over and over, you're only going to get as much out of this stuff as you put into it. And I see you guys asking questions, but I'm not going to read them just because I'll forget what I'm talking about. We'll save those for later. What was I talking about? The vertical initiation. So that's where the repetition comes in. Doing this not just one time and saying, okay, I did it. I went through the initiation. It's doing it every day. Every time you take a step towards divinity, every time you take a step towards God, it will take one towards you. That's what you're doing when you're doing this process. You are taking a step towards divinity. Trying to think if there's anything else to talk about before we go into the actual ritual itself. Probably not, and I don't want to drag this out all night long because I see we're almost already up to 40 minutes. So I'm going to just show you a couple of diagrams. And some of these, y'all seen versions of this before. There's a million different, different renditions of this. But essentially it's the same thing. It's a cosmological map. And you know how I always talk about like actual initiates did not view this as being a model of the actual physical universe necessarily. You probably have always had people who did think that, just like you have people that believe in literal talking snakes and all of that sort of stuff. They think that that's what the Bible really is. They don't understand that it's a metaphor. It's symbolism. This is too. This isn't actually what the external universe looks like. This is you. This is your soul. This is different levels of your aura. And we're going to look at a few different ones tonight. And I'll explain to you why in just a second. Two of them in particular are easier to understand. Well, I'll show you all of them. So first off, you see in this one, you have not only the planets, it's not just the planets that are diagrammed, we also have the elements. There's earth in the middle, there's air, which is the first ring around earth, and there's fire around that. And that's before you ever get into the planetary stuff. That's the elements. So you don't see water listed there. That's because water and earth are almost one and the same. The water, well, you see the water is on the earth. Once again, water is like the densest form of this energy, the energy that we're working with. Same way with this diagram right here. The energies, earth and water, are one and the same. The sphere in the middle, it says both earth and water, and then you have air and fire around it. So in addition to the planets, earth, air, fire, and water are also layers or levels of your soul, layers or levels of your aura. Same way with this. You've got fire, you've got air, and you've got earth and water. So whenever you're doing the self-initiation ritual, you are working on all 4 of those levels of yourself simultaneously. Those are the 4 closest levels to the physical world. You are working on stimulating, feeding. This is what we mean when we say spiritual sustenance. What is sustenance? Sustenance is food. You are feeding those 4 parts of yourself, the parts of your aura that correspond to the elements, the parts of your soul that correspond to the elements. Whenever you're invoking earth, air, fire, and water, you're working on all 4 of those. It is entirely possible to isolate them and work on one at a time. And there are benefits to this too. Just like when you go to the gym, isolating a particular muscle and just focus on using that one to work that one, or you can do something that's like a whole body exercise. What we're doing is sort of a whole body exercise. So I've talked about this ritual before in the past. I'm just going to go through it very briefly right now. If you want to do it, I did this every single day for a year when I was in prison. I think what we're asking people to do is to try it for at least a month, to go through it every day for a month. You know, I realize not everybody has all the time on their hands that I did when I was sitting in a prison cell. But a month is a very reasonable amount of time to do this and start to experience the effects of it. So essentially what you're going to do is, you know, I remember another thing we talked about was how there are 3 parts to any ritual. There's the opening. There at the very beginning is the opening. And at the very end is the closing, and in the middle you have the meat of the ritual. The self-initiation is the meat of the ritual. What I mean by that, the meat of the ritual, this is the whole reason you're doing it. What the opening usually is, it's some kind of cleansing and consecrating that gets you ready to do the big part in the middle. And then the closing is just to shut everything down, but we'll get to that in just a minute. The opening, what you're going to do, that opening, that cleansing, is you're going to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. That's how you open up. That's how you set the stage. That's how you purify your space, and it's how you purify yourself. You're going to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram first. Second, after you've done that, you're going to do the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram. And there's 2 different ways of doing this. You can do it the easier way, the simplified way, if this is your first time starting to do this, or you can do it the more advanced way if you've already gone through this before, if you've been doing some of this. The simple way is just the plain lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Raphael before me, Gabriel behind me, Michael on my right hand, Uriel on my left hand, and you know the way we do it, we always add Metatron above and Sandalphon below. Before you start, you're going to have some sort of little some sort of little cup with water in it. You know, I've talked about before many times how when I was in prison, all I had was a plastic coffee cup. The only thing that matters is you don't use it for mundane purposes. You don't get up in the morning and drink coffee out of it. You don't let other people handle it or touch it. You use it only for the purposes of magic. One is because you want to keep it pure. You don't want other outside energies bombarding it. And what's the other reason? You don't want other outside energies bombarding it? Oh, and you also, every time you do this ritual, a little more and a little more energy is going to accumulate on it, creating a very powerful magical artifact that will, I always say, make your magic stronger. What I mean, Derek, you know, always says things more eloquently. He says it bolsters the efficacy of your ritual work. However you want to look at it. It bolsters the efficacy of your ritual work, makes your magic stronger. This here is the traditional Golden Dawn style chalice. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in just a second for the advanced part of the ritual. But for the simple part of the ritual, all you're going to do after you've done the lesser banishing of the pentagram, you've done the lesser invoking pentagram, and you have all these angels around you, you're going to take the cup of water and you're going to walk to the eastern part of your circle like you're standing in front of Raphael, holding the glass of water up before him. The prayer that you're going to say, the intention, what you're asking for, it does not necessarily have to be in these words. This is one of the reasons that we did not give this ritual in a written form, is because what we're giving you is a skeletal framework that you're going to add to and work with. The point is that it should be, what you're about to say should be sincere, it should be heartfelt, and you should know what you're asking for. You should know what the intention is. What I say, my exact words, is I say, Raphael, Archangel and Guardian of the East, may your power, your blessings, and your favor descend upon this cup. You visualize the yellow light at the top of the universe. You inhale several times, at least 3 times. And every time you inhale, you see it glow brighter and brighter and brighter. And then whenever you exhale the last time, you see a beam of yellow light come down through the universe and completely saturate and surround the cup and the water that's in it. And then you walk over to the southern part of the circle, like you're standing in front of Michael. You say, Michael, Archangel and Guardian of the South, ruler of the element of fire, may your power, your blessings, and your favor descend upon this cup. Visualize the light at the top of the universe as being red. Inhale several times, see it glowing brighter and brighter with each inhalation. Whenever you exhale, see the shaft of red light come down through the universe, saturate and surround the cup. Go to the western part of the circle. Gabriel, Archangel and Guardian of the West, ruler of the element of water, may your power, your blessings, and your favor descend upon this cup. Visualize the light at the top of the universe as blue. Inhale several times, seeing it glow brighter and brighter. Whenever you exhale the 4th time, it completely saturates and surrounds the cup. Go to the northern part of your circle. Do the same thing for Uriel. It does not have to be in my exact words. You're just asking in a heartfelt and sincere way. Uriel, Archangel and Guardian of the North, ruler of the element of earth, may your power, your blessings, and your favor descend upon this cup. You visualize the light at the top of the universe as being green. Inhale several times. Whenever you exhale, see the light come down, saturate and surround your cup. Lastly, keep in mind what you're doing here is you are saying mass. The whole point of Jesus's ministry was to make you your own priest and make you your own king. You're not looking for external leaders in this world, and you're not looking for any kind of religious authority in this world to lead you. That was the biggest, that was the meat of what his ministry was about. Up until that time in history, whether you were a pagan and like a Sumerian or Egyptian or whatever tradition, or whether you were a Hebrew and a monotheistic tradition, whatever it was, you still had to have priests or religious figures acting as a go-between between you and God. The point of what he was teaching is you don't need that anymore. You are your own priest. When you're doing this ritual, what you are doing is doing a mass, just like a priest in a Catholic church does mass every Sunday. Not only every Sunday, but they have to do it every day, even if they're just in a room by themselves doing it for themselves. They still say mass. So after you've taken your cup of water around and gotten all of the blessings of the angels, you're going to go back to the middle of your circle and you're going to ask for the blessing of God, of divinity, of the source of creation on this. And I use a very mangled form of a Golden Dawn prayer. What I always say is something along the lines of, "Hail unto thee, Lord of the light and of the darkness. Hail unto thee, vast and mighty one. Hail unto thee." Wait, I just mangled it. I'm sorry. "Hail unto thee, vast and mighty one. Hail unto thee, Lord of the light and of the darkness. Let your divine light descend upon this cup in order to protect, guide, and illuminate me on my journey through life and on the path of high magic." You're going to see a white light at the top of the universe and inhale at least 3 times, seeing it glow brighter and brighter and brighter, knowing that what you're seeing is the source of all creation. It's the Empyrean, the mind of God. You're seeing it glowing brighter and brighter and brighter. Whenever you exhale, you're going to see that white light come down and completely saturate and surround the cup. You're not going to drink it yet. What you're going to do next is what they call circumambulation. Circumambulation is just a fancy word that means to walk in a circle. Ambulate means, yes, will, thank you. Holy art thou, Lord of the universe. That's what I blanked on. But circumambulate, ambulate means in a circle, or to walk, and circa means in a circle, so to walk in a circle. You're going to start off in the east again, standing in the east but facing south, and you're going to walk around the circle, and when you come back to the east, you're going to inhale and fill the earth with light. And you can do this in a bunch of different ways. You can either do the sign of the Enterer, where you let all of that light rush back up through you out your hands and into the space where the light is going to circulate around you. You're going to picture it as looking like a upside down tornado made of light, or one of those witches' hats that comes to a point made of light spinning around you. You're going to walk around the circle again. When you come back to the east, you're going to inhale, fill the earth with light. What I usually do, I don't do the sign of the Enterer. I usually just use one arm. Inhale, fill the earth with light. I have the sword mudra. I thrust my arm forward and let all of the light rush back up through me and into the upside down tornado of light, seeing it spin even faster and glow even brighter. Walk around a third time. When you come back around the third time, inhale again, fill the earth with light. Thrust your arm forward, seeing this tornado of light, this vortex of energy spinning even faster and glowing even brighter. You want to do this as like at least 3 times, but just like going to the gym, you got to push yourself if you want to get stronger. Maybe the first week you do it 3 times. Second week you do it 6 times. Third week you do it 9 times. Fourth week you do it 12 times. You want to build on that. Last thing you're going to do is you're going to walk back to the middle of your circle with your cup of water sitting in front of you. You're going to close your eyes, and when you inhale, you're going to see all the pentagrams, all of the angels or the archangels. You're going to see the sphere that you're standing inside of. You're going to see the tornado of light. You're going to inhale and see it all glow as bright as you can make it glow. And when you exhale, you see it all collapse into the glass of water. The angels, the vortex of energy, the pentagrams, the sphere that you're standing in, all of it, everything that you have created collapses into the cup of water. and then you're going to drink it. And whenever you drink it, you're going to visualize it completely filling you up from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. Last part of the ritual is the closing. I said there's 3 parts. The opening, which in this case is the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. The middle, the meat of the ritual, the part that, the bulk of what you're doing, that's the lesser invoking of the pentagram and the circumambulating, as well as putting the energy into the cup and drinking it. That's the middle part. The end part is, no, there will not be a text version of this ritual. The end part is the closing. And once again, it does not have to be in these words. This is the whole point. You don't want to get confined. Like, people learn these rituals. Like, when you're looking at the Golden Dawn stuff, people learn these rituals, and then they can't do magic unless they do that exact ritual. They can't figure out like what the process is behind it. So they're stuck doing a formula over and over and over. If they can't do that, then they can't do magic. So what was my point with this? Oh, the closing. What I usually say is what you're doing, I always talk about how when you do these rituals, you've lit up on the astral level of reality, and you may have things that pay attention to that on that energetic level of reality. I always say, I now declare this temple duly closed. Any spirits trapped herein by this ceremony may now depart and return to your own abodes, harming none as you do so. Take with you the blessings, and then I inhale and fill the earth with light and vibrate the divine name, Yeshua. And whenever I vibrate it, I see all of the light pass back up through me and radiate out through the space like ripples of energy, blessing anything that it touches, anything that might be there. You're basically saying this ritual is done, it's closed, it's over. If there's anything around watching, go back to where you came from in a way where there's peace between you and I, all that good stuff. So you're going to do the lesser banishing of the pentagram. You're going to do the lesser invoking of the pentagram. You're going to do the consecration, which is what it's called when you go around and get all of the angels' blessings on the cup. And then you're going to charge the water, which is what you're doing when you're doing the circumambulation. You're creating energy that you collapse into the water for a specific intention. That's the meat. And then lastly, you're going to do a closing. I now declare this temple duly closed. Any spirits trapped herein by this ceremony may now depart. Blah, blah, blah. The reason I brought this up a while ago and said we'll return to this in just a second is because you see all the Hebrew writing on this. There's Hebrew writing and there's also sigils. So what those represent is not only is there an archangel for each direction, like Gabriel, the archangel of the west, who's the archangel whose name you find on here. For every element, there is an archangel, there is an angel, there is a ruler, and there is a king. That's what all these names are. Since this is the tool associated with water, this is the archangel, the angel, the ruler, and the king of the element of water. So the more expanded version of the lesser of the self-initiation ritual is where you're calling on not just the archangels in all 4 directions, but you're calling on like this entire hierarchy. And I've showed y'all this before. We've talked about this. A lot of this is planetary stuff that you're not going to pay attention to yet. Don't worry about that. These names, you can go back and watch this video again. You can screenshot this. However you want to find it, you can Google them, you can look them up, you can get them out of the Golden Dawn book, Israel Regarde's book, you can get them out of Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic, all of that stuff. You can get these things anywhere. But say, for example, in the East, you've got Raphael. Raphael is the archangel of air. Next, you have Chasan. Chasan is the angel of air. Next, you've got Ariel. Ariel is the ruler of air. Lastly, you've got Peralta. Peralta is the king of the air. Behind you, you've got Gabriel, who is the archangel of water. You've got Taliahad, which is the angel of water. You've got Tharsis, which is the ruler of water. And you have Nixa, which is the king, or in this particular case, queen, because it's usually seen as being being more feminine in attribution than masculine. Air and fire are usually seen as more masculine. Water and earth are usually seen as more feminine, although technically it's, people use those words now, and it has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with sexuality, any of that sort of stuff. It's just more correspondences, ways to help you picture things and understand what it is that you're calling on, like the qualities of that energy. So the more advanced version of this ritual, the expanded version, is you know how whenever you inhale, like you inhale and see this pillar of yellow light expand before you, and you vibrate Raphael. Well, then you would inhale again and see a second pillar of light expand behind that first one and vibrate Chasan. Then inhale and see a third pillar of yellow light expand behind that one and vibrate Ariel. Inhale and see a fourth pillar of yellow light extend behind all three of those and vibrate Parada. So you've invoked all four of these intelligences, these energies, these entities in front of you. Then you're going to do the same thing behind you, starting with Gabriel, then Taliahad, then Tharsis, then Nixa. Yako says, what about the divine name? You've done the divine name already whenever you charge the pentagrams. That's what you charge the pentagrams with. So you already have the divine names there. Like in the East, you've got Yehovah. That's what you charge that pentagram with. In the South, you charge it with Adonai. So it's already there. So after you go through that process of invoking all four of these intelligences around you in all four directions, then you would do the circumambulation and collapse all of that energy into the cup. And that's what you would do every single day, unless you are sick or absolutely cannot get out of it. That's what you would do every single day. And that's what a lot of the Golden Dawn tools, you see also, like this is the traditional pentacle. I don't use this. Remember, I use this. So this is the one I was recommending everyone else to get, just so that we're all using the same one. But in the traditional one, same way with the intelligences for Earth on here. You would have Uriel, Forlak, Carib, and Gob. That's what the Hebrew around the outskirts are. So let me look at the questions real quick, see if what y'all are talking about, and if there's any questions that need answering, because I wasn't looking at them whenever they were going by. Yes, I have the Golden Dawn banners for all directions. That is west behind me. Exactly. The old beekeeper says, are the Watchers secret chiefs? Those are the kind of things that I don't really want to talk about a lot anymore, just because I think, I've said in some ways, I think I've done people a disservice by talking about this stuff, because when I tell people about it, even if you hear it and you say, oh, that makes sense, and I believe that 100%, you still just accepted something that I've told you as dogma. And we don't want to, that's not the purpose of what we're doing here. Like, we don't want to trade one set of dogma for another set of dogma. A lot of this stuff we're supposed to have to figure out ourselves. And those are concepts, ideas, and things that will come along much, much later in magic if you really dedicate yourself to it. Honestly, most people are probably only going to come across that stuff in an intellectual way. It won't ever even actually, impact their practice in any way. Let me see. Hold on. Skimming back. just to see what y'all are talking about. One second. You know what? Angelica says, I've never given a license to depart. No wonder things get weird in my office sometimes. A lot of times, things like that, like the license to depart, um, it's more for us. Yes, there could technically be something watching, but a lot of times it's also you just telling your psyche that you're finished. One of the things I talked about and that we're going through on the lower pledge level is this learning ritual magic book. What were we just talking about? Oh, license to depart. So one of the things he gives in this book that I did for years is there's an opening and closing gesture, and you won't find this anywhere else. This is entirely of his creation. But like whenever you're getting ready to start ritual, you start with your hands like you're holding a book, and you open them this way, and then you open them this way. And that's the opening. Whenever you're finished with the ritual and you're getting ready to close it, you start off with your hands like this, and then you bring them together like this, and then you slap them shut like you're closing a book. Part of it is just closing down your own psyche, letting your mind know, okay, I'm finished with this magic business, and it's time to start handling, the physical material world again. So a big part of it is just for you. Let's see. Yeah, Will says, I've always felt like the Quabalistic cross is my closing, and then doing the handbook close thing. That's another one of the things the Quabalistic cross is. It is absolutely like a closing ritual, like sealing. It seals your aura, is what it does. When you do the Quabalistic cross, one of the things it does is seals your aura, which is definitely a kind of closing, of cutting off. Chase says, I always walk around the room and ring a bell with the prayer for beginning and end. Absolutely. That's another thing you can do. Seeing what y'all are talking about. Oh, Twisted Sage says, you said before that this ritual is a formula. Is this a formula for consecration? Could we also do something like this to consecrate an item we want to use as a talisman, for instance? Bingo. That's it exactly. You can take this self-initiation ritual, and technically you could use this one ritual to do magic for anything. The only thing you would have to change is the intention. Like whenever you collapse the energy into something, instead of using a glass of water, you could do it with a talisman. Collapse the energy into a talisman. You could do it with a stone or a crystal. You could do it with a visualization of another person. Like if you know someone who's sick, or someone who's going through a hard time, like mentally or emotionally or spiritually in any way, you visualize them standing in front of you in the ritual space, and you collapse all the energy into them. That is 100% exactly what you're doing. And the same thing happens, like if you were to go through an initiation ritual with a group, they do the same thing to you that you're doing to this cup of water in the self-initiation ritual. They would carry you to the eastern part of the circle and invoke Raphael's blessing or consecration on you. Then they would take you around to the southern part of the circle and invoke Michael's blessing or consecration on you. Take you all around the circle and do the exact same thing to you that you do to the cup. And then the group would circumambulate the temple, and then they would collapse all of the energy into you. That's what a true initiation is. If you're going through an initiation with a group of people, that's what they would be doing. You're talking about a group of trained people who know how to work with energy, who are using you as the cup that you just drank from. The only difference is it's other people doing it instead of you, and they're collapsing the energy into you. That's why it doesn't work so often, is because most of them don't know how to even create the energy. They're just like, saying words that they don't understand, and they've memorized the, directions to draw this and draw that. It's all this, intellectual theory and philosophy and all that, but they don't even know how to actually, perceive and work with energy. So them doing that to you is not going to have that big of an effect on you. Like I said, there are exceptions to that rule. Some people do know, some people do understand, but for the most part, you're better off on your own. So Mandy says, I feel like I'm in a constant state of MP, to be honest. I'm guessing by that you mean middle pillar. That's how I was for a long time too. So organic meditation says, at any point you also invoke the elementals, salamanders, undines, sliffs, etc. That's what the king is. The king of each element is the king of the elementals. Like Parada is the king of the elementals of air. Jinn is the king of the elementals, the salamanders of fire. Nixa is the queen of the undines. So whenever you're calling on the king or the queen of each element, that's what you're doing. You're working with those what are they called? The elementals. That's what you're doing. Yeah, Yako says, I think consecrating is the equivalent for initiating when you talk about objects. That's very true also. They say that a talisman is a living thing. Like once you create a talisman, they say that it is alive. The only difference in a talisman and a person is that you have a soul, whereas a talisman just has a purpose, like an intention, but it's still got all of that divine energy in it. So Angelica says, great questions, Scalosi. Let me see. I don't see the question. Oh, there it is. It says, do we have to use a chalice? Could we absorb it into our Tippereth center? You absolutely can. You don't have to use anything. As a matter of fact, you want to get to a place where you don't need to use anything. If the only way you could do this stuff is using these tools, then what happens when you get in a situation where you don't have access to these tools? You're just screwed. So yes, you absolutely can. Like when you collapse the energy, you can just see it completely collapse it into you. You can see it completely fill your body and your aura from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. That's one way of doing it. Another way to do it is whenever you inhale, you see it all around you. You see the angels, the archangels, the rulers, the kings, the pentagrams, the swirling vortex of energy around you. You inhale, you see it all as bright as you can. And whenever you exhale, you see it all sucked into your Tippereth center, right in the middle of your chest. Absorbed into your Tippereth center. Exhale and radiate it out through you. Yes, you absolutely can do that. Seeing what y'all are talking about. Give me 1 second. I'm not familiar. Organic meditation says this really reminds me of Tibetan Buddhism's building the mandala. I am not familiar with that phrase or that ritual, so I can't say anything about that. Carrie Bearden says, is it up to you or should the spear be added at a certain point in ritual? You do it just like you've been doing it. You know, if you've been doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, then you know when to do it. You know, like after you invoke all the angels around you, you hook the sphere and you close it above your head. You hook it and you close it beneath your feet. And then whenever you do the invoking ritual, you go back around, you draw all the pentagrams, you invoke all the angels, and then you close that above your head and you close that below your feet. You do it in the exact same place, the exact same form, the exact same way as, when you've been doing it the whole time. And what it acts as, we talked about one of the things, and this is the last thing I'll say and then I'll shut up. We talked about how important silence is. If you were in the groups, we were talking about how you don't go around just talk. Yeah, X says, I didn't know I should do that. That's what I mean about how like so much stuff is not in these books. Like it doesn't tell you that in the Golden Dawn book. It just tells you draw this ring of light around the room. Well, one of the things they say that this ritual is for protection. Well, if it were protecting you from outside energies and you just draw this ring of light around the room, then why wouldn't anything just go over? Or why wouldn't anything just come up under? All you've got is this one little ring of light around the room. And it's because that's the way it's drawn in the Golden Dawn book. But you're not actually standing inside a ring of light. You're standing inside a sphere of light. This is one of the reasons also, we've talked about this stuff on here like a million times in the past. Like if y'all have been with me, I've been on here, been doing like Patreon for about 6 years now, I think. And we've covered pretty much all of that sort of stuff multiple times. That's why I always say, don't just watch, like if you're new on here, if you just came on Patreon, don't just watch the latest video. Like you really should go, this stuff is archived where you can go back and watch all of these videos for the past 6 years and get more out of all of this stuff, including things like that, like closing the sphere. But what I was going to say is the silence thing. What was it? Something associated with that. Something in connection with the silence. Oh, hermetically sealed. So one of the things we were talking about is how, you don't want to be talking about this stuff with just anybody. It's different if you have a question about something and you're asking someone, or someone is asking you a question about something, when there's a legitimate reason for asking about this stuff or talking about this stuff. But for the most part, that's not going to arise very often in most people's lives. What we're talking about when we're talking about silence is you don't want to be one of those people that you'll see like on social media sometimes, like, hey folks, got my altar set up, getting ready to do some ritual work here. That's what we mean about silence. And part of the reason is because exactly right. Brandy says talking can be an energetic leak. That's exactly right. One of the things that Derek was bringing up was about like how alchemists would hermetically seal their containers. You hermetically seal it for 2 reasons. One is because you don't want outside energy leaking into it, saturating it and messing up what you've been working on, and you don't want what's in it to escape. Well, if you're talking about it, if just doing stuff like that, then that energy is going to escape. You're hemorrhaging energy. And you're not going to experience the results. How even I used to talk, I used to tell you things like I would talk about like, all of these visions and epiphanies and realizations and stuff that I was going through, like with even talking about like the Sumerian gods and stuff like that. The more you talk about these things, the less you will experience them. Like I'm like, even talking about it now, I don't experience that stuff like I used to. And part of it is because I'm not holding the energy in anymore. Even if it's doing it in a way that's productive, that's constructive, that's trying to be helpful, like sharing stuff with you guys, I'm still losing some of the energy. So I don't have those bigger epiphanies and realizations. It's not like we're saying, like some orders or traditions will say, you are sworn to an oath of secrecy. You will not tell anyone where this temple is. You will not tell anyone anything you see here. You will not tell anyone about anyone you come in contact with here. That's not what we're doing in Magnum Opus. The only reason we suggest silence is because you want to be hermetically sealed. You want to hold that energy in, and you don't want to, take on impurities from the outside world. But that's also what you're doing when you close that sphere above you and below you. You are hermetically sealing this space so that no outside energy is going to interfere with what you're doing, and so that none of the energy that you're creating is going to escape. It's not going to go anywhere except what's into what you're doing. When you close that sphere above your head and below your feet, you are hermetically sealing your space. Okay, give me one more second. I'm going to look one more time real quick, and then I'm going to shut up. Yes, XX says, I got made fun of at work for saying that I read tarot. I'll just shut up. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean about how you don't want outside energy infiltrating or saturating you. When you start, next thing you know, you're going to have people talk magic. What do you think you are, Harry Potter? That stuff isn't real. People prove that magic doesn't work hundreds of years ago. What are you, a science denier? You don't need people like planting like those kind of seeds of doubt in your mind. Like even if you had complete success at things like reading the tarot before in your case, it still makes you feel different. It does something to you when you have people saying stuff, doing stuff, putting stuff in you. That's why you stay hermetically sealed. Elizabeth McElroy says, where do I find the diagram of the hierarchy of angels in each corner? We've posted it on here several times in the past. You would have to look through probably a few years of, if you want them off of here, you would have to look back and find it in the past. You can also find this information in Israel Regardie's The Golden Dawn, Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic. You can Google it. This stuff is out there. There's no information about magic that you can't find out there. If you just have to know where to look. You have to know what you're looking for. So you can find most of this stuff nowadays just by doing a Google search. It's not like it's all secret or hidden stuff anymore. Carrie says, when will other classes be open? Right now, we have no idea. Right now, we have everything that we can possibly handle on our plates. Not related to this. Philip Pasora says, are you the Damien who asked questions on the Glitch Bottle podcast? That would not be me. I'm not even sure what that is. But the rest of it, we'll see. We will see when more spots open up. Oh, Max says most of the books we talk about in here are available on Scribd. I guess that's how you say it, SCRIBD. Okay, so I'm going to shut up and we're going to get off of here because we've been going for almost an hour and a half already. I am getting ready to head to New York soon. This will be the first time I've been back there in over a year and a half since I left, and I am both trepidatious and excited about it. So scribed, Mariana says, scribed. So going to New York, Dave and I, if y'all haven't seen it yet, we started this new series of videos we're calling Invisible Cities, and we did one on New Orleans. Our next one is going to be on New York. We're going to do Invisible Cities New York, and we're going to be filming it over Christmas. So Asia says, I'm asking for Hermetic books for Christmas, but wondering the number one you recommend. Number one and number two that I always recommend to everybody is Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig and Learning Ritual Magic by John Michael Greer, Claire Vaughn, and Earl King Jr. Those are the two. But if you're going to go for three, I would also say The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. Okay, guys, I'm going to shut up. All right. I just want to say I love you guys. Thank y'all for bearing with me and for being interested in this and for wanting to do this work, for your support through all of these years. Just thank y'all. It means a great deal to me, and I hope you get as much out of this as I do, because I do get a lot out of this. I appreciate you guys a lot. And if we didn't get to all the questions tonight, thank you, Angelica. Angelica saying happy birthday. If we didn't get to all the questions tonight, write them down. Don't forget them. And whenever we come back, we'll do some more question and answers too. We haven't just done a question and answer session in a while. All right. Love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.